Hello, I'm also here. I wasn't introduced, but I will be the host of this panel. My name is Jitze, and I will take a seat in the middle, which feels very grandfather-like. And as they rightly said, it's really hard to get to the truth of climate change, where when you start Googling, you get in rabbit holes, and from hoax to really serious policies. But what can we do? What can innovation do? And what will be a step that we can all take home when we leave here? This is, well, at least for me, what I hope to get out of this. But I'm also wondering what my esteemed guests will think of this. We have a panel that combines all the possible steps I would see, from the politics to the activists to the scientists. And let's start with those different roles and see how you guys combine that. To start with the lady, of course. Patricia, Patti, how do you see that? Because you're, as we just talked, you said I'm both an activist, but you're also a scientist. Mm-hmm. How do you juggle those roles?
Well, I think that it has, because of the situation that we find ourselves in, I think that we have come to a moment where we need all hands on deck, and we need all sort of people and roles in society to be engaged in how are we going to solve this crisis. I think it is quite unfair to ask of scientists to just try and describe phenomena and describe the world when there is so much at stake for us. Because if the planet collapses, if ecosystems collapse, if civilization collapses, then what's the point in having these descriptions anyway, right? So I think that, yeah, I think that I try my best to negotiate both roles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does for me. And Guus, as a colleague of hers, yeah, the same question to you, because there's a difference between opinions and facts.
Yes, that's true.
So
does the mic actually work or not? I can't hear it myself.
Well, we can hear you.
We can hear you. Okay, that's good. Yeah, there is a difference between opinions and facts, but the facts are very bad. So if you start from climate change, or climate change science, that already gives you a huge spur to action if you know some of the details about what's awaiting us. I mean, it's a complex story, but it's also a very frightening story. And a lot of climate scientists, I'm not a climate scientist myself, no, nobody's perfect, I'm a social scientist. But if you listen to the climate science carefully, yeah, it's a very frightening picture of the future they portray for us. And so for I don't know, decades I didn't really understood what is at stake until, as a social scientist, I thought, I'm dealing with society and politics and culture and history. So nature and climate, that's something for other scientists. Until I did read up, and then 4 weeks later I was on the streets.
Basically. It took you 4 weeks to get from where a lot of us probably are to getting picked up by the police because you're...
Yes.
Your mic does work, but it's scratching from your beard, so... Yeah, that's better. Cheers. Benito, you're also, well, as I said just earlier, you're a bit of the odd one out here because you come from a jeugdzorg background. You work for them. You're also a student. You're in a committee Hamer, so you're on also the political, the policy side. What brings you to this lovely panel?
Well, I think it's very important, as you both already said. The climate crisis is very urgent. It's very existential. It's, for some of us, most of us, very scary. But for a lot of people, the climate crisis is very abstract. It's very, unknown, because they have very pressing other concerns. Can I get to the next day? Can I get to the next week? So what I try to do is talk to those people. What makes, that you have those concerns, and how can we get those concerns out of the way so you can also focus about the thing that is waiting in the future, the climate crisis.
Okay, so that's how you combine those two missions. Excellent. And at last, the question to you, you're juggling being the politician here in Enschede. You're elected for Volt, and being an activist at the same time. Is it difficult?
No, I think it's for me at least, it felt very natural. I think I started as an activist, and then you try to have an influence on the world. And especially within Scientists for Future, I felt that there was one professor who was already finished with his career, and he said, yeah, we had the limits of growth already in 1970 or something, but the politicians didn't listen. So it felt very natural at the start of my career to think, okay, I'm not really interested in going into science, but I definitely see a place for me in politics, because apparently for the past 50 years they didn't listen to the science. So better.
But then here in the local politics, so then with all these things you know and the concerns you have to talk for hours about traffic lights.
Those are your words, not mine.
So this isn't the case.
No,
You're actually getting things done within the gemeente Enschede.
And if you're not getting things done, you know what in the democratic system works and what in the democratic system doesn't work, and you know where to campaign on if you want people to actually realize how much effect your vote has on how the world around us looks like.
Excellent, excellent. We'll dive into that later. First, while I'll pass on some water to you guys, if you want to, let me ask you in the audience, who, by showing hands, who would consider themselves an activist on the climate? Two, who doesn't give, or who says it's all a hoax, the climate change thing? No one dares. And who is, like Benito says, just busy. They're doing their best, but you know, you also got all other things to go through. Yeah, I think that goes for a lot of us.
Those are your words as well.
Well, you said something like that. So. Let me pass around some water. So I think that is maybe a good point to start. Guus, wil je ook wat water? Won't bother you. I thought it was a really interesting panel discussion to have on an innovation festival, because for a lot of, I think for a lot of us, it's also like it's the two sides of the debate. People say, yeah, there's climate change. Yeah, we'll innovate ourselves out of that. One of these days, we're going to invent how we can drive with just water, and then we'll be all right. Or how do you guys see that? Can we innovate ourselves out of it? Guus?
I don't think so, no. So if you hear what climate scientists are saying now, so that's basically the community talking about what kind of transition do we need. There are few in that community, or I would say none, close to none, that say that technology itself, if you talk about technology as an innovation only, yeah, you can also think differently about innovation. But technological innovation is insufficient at the current pace to keep us below 1.5 degree. We're currently at 1.2 degrees of warming. We have only 6 years left. Before that, what we call carbon budget, so how much CO2 do we dump into the atmosphere before we get to that dangerous level of global warming. There's only 6 years left, so there is no technology at present that can, in that time period, do some magical work for us. Now, you can also think about innovation differently, if you talk about political innovation, for instance, or social innovation. And then I think I would believe in that more strongly.
Okay, let's dive into that further. But first, Patty, you as a philosopher, which also focuses in Enschede a lot on technique, have we believed too much in technology to solve our issues?
I do think, yeah, I do think that well, when I say we, I think I mean people who are mostly active in defining, like policies around climate change, or even projecting, these different pathways of how we can limit global warming, have overestimated greatly what innovation, what technology could do to address the issue. I think that many of the pathways that have been presented, for instance, by the IPCC, rely on technologies that have not, that have not been demonstrated that they can work up to a scale that would be needed in order to limit the warming. So there's a really dangerous term going going on around, which is we can offshoot, like our carbon budget. We can just, it's okay if we keep emitting for a while, because then technology is going to help us somehow capture that carbon or those greenhouse gas emissions. But I think that perhaps we are a bit guilty of hubris. We are maybe way too confident in what we can achieve with innovation and technology than what we can actually do, I would say.
Okay. Anything to add, Erik?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are different forms of technology, and I think it's very sad that most technology these days is actually built to disempower people. So it's like a magic technology, a magic device, and somehow kids grow up thinking that by swiping they can change the world. So I think sometimes technology that is really designed to be an instrument so that you grow and you learn while using the technology, that type of technology can help us a lot. But if I see companies making money of selling shower timers instead of telling people, okay, this is what the concept of the water footprint is, and you make more difference with buying one t-shirt less than showering less, I think that then it's just, I mean, you're just trying to solve the problem in the old, let's say, the old system. And then yet again, people who have good intentions, there's some saying about good intentions, I hope you all know it, the way to hell is paved with good intentions. I think there's still a lot of people with good intentions that are, in the end, making someone profit of something like a shower timer with a chip in it with rare earth materials, instead of just telling someone how the concept of the water footprint works. So sometimes I really think that technology is ridiculous because it disempowers, whereas we should be empowering people to understand how we can actually make a difference.
Are there technologies, Guus, that you know of that could help us?
Well, there's renewable energy. That's a technology that we definitely need. So in that sense, I mean, there's also... Is this still me or not?
No, I think it was me.
Okay. I'm sitting very...
Talking about technology, of course.
Of course, we need these technologies. They have problems of their own. I mean, they also lead to a lot of resource extraction, to a lot of pollution. But there's also no way out of our current fossil fuel economy if we do not use any technology whatsoever. So of course we need that. What is more tricky is that oftentimes these other kinds of technologies, like sucking carbon out of the air, they are used to say basically, well, we can go on, what Patty also mentioned, and then it gets really dangerous. So these are more technological wishful thinking. There are forms of utopianism that are not really recognized as such because we think, well, technology, that's nice. Why not use it? But there's a lot of wishful thinking and a lot of claims that are actually unsupported by science.
What is the biggest wish you see now that we're...
The biggest wish is basically that we continue using fossil fuels and that we can then later on have some way to
add some biofuel or...
Yeah, some small incremental steps. Yeah. And for 30 years we have basically postponed the problem. Every year our emissions keep on rising, so we're not even flattening the curve, we're not even slowly going downhill, and definitely not sort of the roughly 10% reduction rates that we should have per year. And so, yeah, technology's helped there to keep us believing that we can still cope with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we come to the issue of maybe social innovation or other kinds of innovation, because Benito, whether you think people keep believing in small incremental steps when they see the facts?
Sure.
Well, we're going to hell, as I can say what Erik said. So I think we all know that in some way. We've seen year after year that all the issues that climate change is real. We can feel it. Last summer, or already we see that there's drought, and still, well, at least let me then just talk about me. I think I'm really relieved if someone says, "Oh yeah, we can just give the cows something that they can fart less, and then we're good for a couple of years."
Yeah.
Or yeah, let's all drive Teslas, and then we're all right. So why don't we want to make the big steps and the big investments in our personal life?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who want to take the big steps, but I think there's also a lot of people who don't want to take any steps whatsoever. And I think that is the complicated situation that we are in our political system. We have political parties in parliament that say, well, the climate crisis is not even a crisis at all. So what I think is important is to give all those different kinds of people, just civilians, a voice in the policy-making process so they can understand what is happening. Because if you're just going to push it through, people will just, Dutch people, they will just say, no, we're not going to do that if they're forced to do something they don't understand. So I think it's very important to include people in the process, to hear their concerns, to address those concerns, and to take those concerns away.
Yeah, but if you involve them too much, isn't it the case that we get like a political party like BBB, who just soothes us further and says, yeah, we can just go on like this with a bit of this and and then
I think
another 4 years have passed.
That's possible, but I also think it's very important to do something about this in our educational system. Because I'm just 21, I'm a student. Not so long ago, I was still in high school, and I learned nothing about the climate crisis whatsoever. So I think that's also a very important step of taking climate action, to get people to understand why it's necessary to take climate action. Because a lot of people they don't know it yet.
Did anyone here get something about climate change at school?
Can I ask something?
Sure, but first I'll answer my question. Did you get something about on school?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're younger, so maybe it's.
No,
are
I'm
you younger than how old are you?
23.
23?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then you're younger. So I don't know.
I guess
What
it
was your
depends on
question,
the
please?
school. No, I'm wondering, shouldn't, because now you were talking about education, right? And I agree, it's super important that in education, like all types of levels, we teach young people about climate change. But if governments don't even agree on the fact that education is needed in terms of climate change, then what are we even talking about, right? And that's also related to what you just said, that there are some parties, of course it's important to listen to everyone, but do we really have the time to really wait for all of them to agree on the fact that we need education in this case? So
you're thinking we should have a climate change dictator type to really get things through?
That's not what I mean.
Let's ask our politician. Say the Dutch way, the polderen, it's going to take ages. How do we get proper action?
Yeah, I think that you can also educate yourself, and I think a lot of people. So you were talking about micro activism. I sometimes hear that people think, yeah, but if I change my own behavior, it only makes a little difference. But only if you stop with something mentally, you make room for exploring the alternative. So if you stop eating meat, you have to look for vegetarian recipes. So I'm also a digital activist. If you stop using, if you don't want to support Zuckerberg and you stop using WhatsApp, because that's acting, if you care enough that it's bad, you act, so you stop using it, you don't support it, then only then if you stop, there opens up a window in your head, okay, now I have to look for an alternative. And I think that's a big part of education and sustainability that you can do yourself. So if you don't like microplastics and you like sporting, as I do, then only by saying, okay, I will not buy plastic sports clothing anymore, then you start looking and educating yourself about, okay, what are the alternatives? And they are there. But only if you stop with one thing, you sort of start really intentionally looking for alternatives that are actually already out there. And I think you can do a lot in educating yourself and your, let's say, your bubble by, basically what you said, actually caring enough to act on it, stopping with one thing, and then educating yourself about the alternatives.
It's really uncomfortable, and you're thinking about your shoes and your phone and your. How can we? What should we stop tomorrow?
Fly less, buy less, meat less. I would.
Oh, that's great. Please again.
Fly less, buy less, so you can also donate your money to Sea Shepherd. I would advise that. And meat less, so don't eat meat.
Okay.
Then I would be very happy.
I'm doing 2 out of 3. Oh, that's not too bad. Question here. Do I have a throw mic or a throw cabrioletje?
Do you actually think that having a meatless diet is better than plant-based. Because, for example, for meat, for cow, you just need to give them like the grains and that's it. Whereas for the plants, you have to put the peptides, you have to kill everything that touches the plant. Whereas for the cow, well, it's different, but like, for the cows, you don't have to kill as much.
I don't exactly understand the question, do you?
Yeah, so I mean, if you don't like pesticides, then you look for farms that don't use pesticides. So yes, it takes time, it takes effort, but they are there. Also here in Enschede, multiple of them. So they exist, and I know because I buy them. And no, I don't think that you should eat meat for example, your health. I mean, I do a lot of sports. I run a marathon, I do obstacle runs, and I am on a plant-based diet, and it's fine. So no, I don't see any reason to stay at a meat-based diet.
Thanks for this nice and concrete question. Let's go one step back, because how do we get not just you, but the entire society moving? There are several activists here, but also a policy advisor, a politician. What do you think? Because you're in another area, but busy writing policies, discussing policies. What do you think is a good way to get that thing really going?
Well, I think it's hard for the climate movement not to force their opinion on other people, and I get that. It's hard for me sometimes as well. But I think it's very important. You're right, we don't have the time to, have the long conversations about is it even necessary. But I think it is important to listen to the concerns that people are having for their own personal situations as a result of the climate action that we're taking. And that doesn't mean we don't have to take action, but it does mean we have to listen to the concerns that people have.
What would be a concern, and what could we say to those people?
Well, I think it's important to just listen to them within the policy process.
But give us an example.
You want an example of a concrete?
Yeah. So what would be concern people would put to you and say, that's why I can't, eat less meat or drive electrical?
Well, driving electrical is very expensive. Buying an electric car is not something everyone can do. And if you look at the policy we're making, then the idea is that electrical cars are going to be subsidized. But even then, it's still not available for everyone. And at the same time, gasoline is going to be more expensive. And I think we understand why that's happening, but a lot of people don't get that. And those are the people that are having the, experience the consequences of the expensive gasoline prices. So I think it's important to listen to those concerns, to talk to those people.
I think that is relevant. Isn't it just money? Because once the gas prices were even, the danger of them going higher, already people just turned down their heater, and I think we saved in the year 25% of our usual gas usage. To everyone, but let's start.
I mean, that was the big mistake of Macron, right? When he put up the prices for diesel in France, he was not thinking about justice. That was the big problem. So people said, okay, yeah, you can think that just by increasing diesel you will make the climate better, you will mitigate climate crisis. But then all the poor people in France said, we can't afford an electric car, so let's not do that. So he was not taking into account the aspect of climate justice, and then what happened. And I'm not really a proponent of electric cars. I think we should just first think about walking and biking, and then let's say the train. But yeah, if you even mention the word money, I think you should always think in terms of justice. So which different groups are affected differently?
Can I add to this?
Please do.
Because I've been thinking in the last exchanges, Benito was mentioning earlier how there's this big difference between people who want to take steps to solve the climate crisis and who are, and there's people who maybe don't have so much time, or, maybe they are busy doing something else. Maybe they're stressed about their jobs. Now, there's a lot of people here saying like, well, I'm doing my best, but also, an individual can only go so far. And don't get me wrong, I get that you know, as an individual looking for alternatives, looking at the things that you can do, it's really powerful, and it shows other people what alternatives there are out there. But let's not lose sight of the systemic problems that are leading us to have these differences between us, where some people can, you know, can afford to care and modify their behavior and focus on climate issues, and some other people find themselves stuck perhaps in a system that, you know, and maybe not only here in the Netherlands, but in the rest of the world, where they have to work 12-hour shifts, you know, to be able to put food on the plate of their families. And where I'm going with this is that I think that, and this relates to climate justice, that I think we have to connect the dots and see how the fact that there's a lot of politicians and there's a lot of really powerful people behind companies that are stalling and being an obstacle to climate action. Well, why are they doing that? Because they're doing great, right? They are benefiting so much from the way that society is run right now, whereas all these people that are working 12-hour shifts that cannot afford to do climate action, they are not benefiting from that. So how do we connect the dots? How do we connect climate action with social justice, and how we as privileged members of society, you know, talking about this issue here in this really nice stage, can speak for the people who are not as privileged and who may not afford to do the type of climate action that will lead us to a better, fairer society. Yeah. That's
Here. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Betty.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is this also the kind of reasoning, because we talked about policy and politics and incremental steps, that made you go from, in 4 weeks, from I read this to, okay, I have to be on the street,
yeah.
talking, you know, not taking over the Shell stand at a...
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I already noticed it here. So we've devoted a lot of time to understanding the climate crisis and talking about hell and I don't know what kind of scenarios. But I think so already here I sort of note that we don't talk about the problem and what is actually happening, and so it will be very abstract. So the first thing is that a lot of people would need sort of the similar experience that I had in this summer holiday reading. And you don't need to wait for the government, I think. Already at universities we can introduce compulsory courses. So one course for all students, so that no student leaves the university without a clear understanding.
Radboud University does that now.
Yeah, it has made a start of that. Because, I mean, we're skipping over the issue. So why are we talking even of a climate crisis right now at 1.2 or close to 1.5 degrees? Well, you know, in Somalia last year, 43,000 people died because of the climate crisis. 5 consecutive years of drought led them to abandon their traditional way of living and also starving. And, you know, multiple millions of people might get to the point of starvation in the coming half year because of that drought. That is what we talk about. That's why we talk about a crisis situation already at particular parts of the Earth. Now, if you look at 3 degrees, which is what we're heading for, so there is, if we follow all the sustainability and climate change policies that policymakers promise, we will still hit 3 degrees of global warming by 2100. Now, that means, and I'm just going to give you 2 examples of what that means. That means that half of the plants and half of the insect population or the species will be at the brink of extinction or are already extinct, and a quarter of the vertebrates, so us and other animals. It's very difficult to imagine that we can actually pull through such a situation in terms of getting our food, in terms of arable land, in terms of agriculture. If we hit the 3 degrees, a large swath of the Earth, so basically around the equator, so that is a large part of Africa, India, China, the northern part of Latin America, and the southern part of the US, and everything in between, these parts will be uninhabitable. So that means that the human body cannot sustain living there because it's for prolonged periods of time above 50 degrees of Celsius. So that simply means after a couple of weeks you'll die. So that is what we're heading for, and the kind of information we should share. So even if we follow all the best intentions of politicians, this is the scenario that we'll have in 80 years. And of course, in the meantime, it will get progressively worse. You know, this is what I read in the summer holidays, so not just the small issues or something you read in the news, but the kind of things we're heading for if we don't drastically change in the coming years, or basically starting right now. And that is where I immediately, because I know policy, that is my expertise, I know politics, and I immediately thought, I understand it. They never want to share this problem, because if this is widely known, then basically they will have to have such a massive reform program that they are afraid that people won't buy it. And that's why the only thing I believe in is mass civil disobedience. So if we all get up from our seats, not right now, you can.
Yeah, we could.
You
sure.
can wait for 3 more
please
minutes,
and
then
microactivism.
actually act as a citizen and not just as a consumer, because we don't have to wait for our government to do it. It's not planning to do it. It has never planned to do it. Same goes for companies. They have a lot of promises, but they won't get there until there is very, very big, nasty political public pressure to do it.